During World War II, slavery and forced labor were used on an unparalleled scale in Nazi Germany and all of German-occupied Europe. It was a crucial component of Germany's economic exploitation of conquered lands. Additionally, it played a role in the widespread eradication of populations in occupied Europe. In this video, you will discover to what extent Nazi forced laborers were pushed. Before we begin, please subscribe and turn on the notification to keep seeing videos like this. About 12 million people were taken hostage by the Germans, and about 2/3 were from Central and Eastern Europe. Extreme abuse, acute starvation, and worse tortures were the leading causes of death among laborers due to their living conditions. Throughout the war, many civilians perished due to enemy bombing and shelling off their places of employment. Forced laborers made up 20% of the workforce in Germany at its height. In total, 15 million men and women were forced to work during the conflict, counting deaths and turnover. Approximately 11 million foreigners, referred to as displaced persons, were released after Nazi Germany was defeated in 1945. The majority of these individuals were forced laborers and prisoners of war. Along with Soviet prisoners of war, the German forces had brought 6.5 million civilians into the Reich during the war for forced labor in factories. The Allies placed a great focus on getting them back home. Returning, however, meant frequently being under suspicion of conspiracy or being sent to the Gulag. In the case of USSR citizens, food, clothing, shelter, and aid with the journey home were made available through military operations, the Red Cross, and the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration. Hitler's Lebensraum program significantly emphasized the conquest of additional areas in the East, also known as General Plan Ost, and the exploitation of these lands to further Germany with low-cost goods and labor. Nazi Germany had a steady supply of slave labor even before the war. This practice dates back to the earliest unreliable elements, labor camps, which were used to house the homeless, homosexuals, criminals, political dissidents, communists, Jews, and other individuals the regime wished to get rid of. The Nazis ran a variety of Arbeitslager for various types of prisoners during World War II. Inhumane working conditions and meager rations led to the death of prisoners in Nazi labor camps, and those who became incapable of working were executed. Numerous people perished as a direct result of Nazi forced labor. Polish Jews over the age of 12 and Poles living in the general government over the age of 12 were forced to work after Poland was invaded. According to historian Jan Gross, no more than 15% of Polish workers voluntarily moved to Germany to work. All non-German residents of the general government were required to perform forced labor in 1942. The Fremdenbeamte, brought to Germany to work for the Reich, developed a class structure. The system was built on a hierarchy of workers, from Germany's allies or neutral nations to slave laborers from captured undermentioned populations. Laborers from Germanic and Scandinavian nations, France, Italy, other German allies, and friendly neutrals are referred to as guest workers. Only 1% of foreign workers in Germany came from nations that were neutral or allies of Germany. So this was a very small group. Zwangsarbeiter, forced laborers from nations who were not allies of Germany. The following classifications were used to categorize this group of employees. First, Militärdienstleute are prisoners of war. The Geneva Conventions gave captor states the right to require non-officer prisoners of war to perform limited labor. For instance, over 300,000 Polish non-officer prisoners of war were made to labor for the Nazis. Second, Zivilarbeiter are German government employees of Polish descent. They had to work longer hours for smaller food rations and were subject to curfews. They also received much lower wages and were prohibited from using amenities like public transportation or visiting many public places and businesses. For instance, they were not allowed to go to German church services, swimming pools, or restaurants. Third, Western European foreign laborers often had comparable gross incomes to German workers and were subject to comparable taxation. In contrast, the forced laborers in Central and Eastern Europe received considerably fewer social benefits and, at most, around half the gross wages paid to German workers. Few, if any, wages and benefits were provided to prisoners of war or concentration camps who were forced to work. German and foreign workers were forbidden from having sexual connections according to the Nazis. To stop these relationships, numerous attempts were made to spread Volksstrom, or racial consciousness. Disobedient women were locked up. Even mingling with the workforce was forbidden. And between 1940 and 1942, pamphlet campaigns were targeted. Any such limitations did not apply to SS officers of Wehrmacht men. It's estimated that during the Third Reich, at least 34,140 Eastern European women captured in pandas, military kidnapping operations, were made to work as sex slaves in German military brothels and concentration camp brothels. In September 1942, 5 such facilities with a minimum of 20 rooms each were put up in Warsaw alone. In contrast to the Western Front, alcohol was not permitted there, and the sufferers had weekly genital exams. When France fell and the ports of Brest, Lorient, and Saint-Nouat became available, there needed to be more Germans to staff the repair and maintenance facilities, so heavy reliance was placed on the French workforce. The Kriegsmarine wanted 2,700 skilled employees from Wilhelmshaven to work in bases on the Atlantic coast at the end of 1940. But this was out of a total available workforce of only 3,300. The same request includes 870 men competent in machinery and engine building, while Wilhelmshaven only had 725 persons with these talents. The French naval dockyard personnel were responsible for the enormous deficit. In February 1941, only 470 Germans worked in the naval dockyard in Brest, compared to 6,349 French laborers. In April 1941, French workers rebuilt damaged superheater tubes on the Scharnhorst, working slowly but to a higher grade than could be obtained in German yards, according to the commander of Scharnhorst. An October 1942 assessment commissioned by Vice-Admiral Walter Midthe of the potential effect of withdrawing French dockyard workers stated that all surface fleet repairs would cease and U-boat repairs would be reduced by 30%. On September 30th, 1940, Admiral Darlan indicated that refusing German requests for collaboration was pointless. In September 1942, the commander of the French Navy in the occupied zone, Rear Admiral Germain Paul Jardel, declared, "We have a special interest in that the workers at our arsenals work, and that they work in the arsenals and not in Germany." From a practical standpoint, French employees required work and could be conscripted to labor in Germany, as 1 million were. Only a tiny percentage objected to doing military tasks, but the Germans found the bulk willing and efficient workers. The Polish forced laborers are a single example of a group that received almost little compensation for their service as forced laborers in Nazi Germany. According to the 1945 Potsdam Agreements, the Poles were to get reimbursements not from Germany, but from the USSR's share of those reparations. Due to the Soviet tension on the Polish Communist government, the Poles agreed to a repayment system that few Polish victims received any adequate compensation compared to the victims in Western Europe or the Soviet Union itself. As of August 1999, the total number of Nazi-era slave laborers still alive was 2.3 million. The German Forced Labor Compensation Program was formed in 2000. A forced labor fund paid out about 4.37 billion euros to over 1.7 million then living victims worldwide. One-time payments ranging from 2,500 to 7,500 euros. German Chancellor Angela Merkel declared in 2007 that many former forced laborers have finally received the promised humanitarian aid. She also admitted that before the establishment of the fund, nothing had gone directly to the forced laborers. German President Horst Kohler noted it was an action that was desperately required along the path to peace and reconciliation. At the very least, these symbolic payouts have publicly acknowledged the victims' suffering after decades of being forgotten. You must have been emotionally tensed witnessing the horrors inflicted on the Nazi forced laborers. Let us know what you think in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel as you leave. Thanks for watching.